You stole it, didn't you? Dominic Romano's voice echoed through the kitchen as his cold eyes locked onto Olivia Hayes. The Mafia boss was towering over her, his anger as sharp as his suit was expensive. She stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. She had worked for him for months, always invisible, always in the background. Yet now, here she was, accused of stealing something precious from the one man who controlled everything in this house. I didn't take anything, Mr. Romano. Olivia stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Her hands trembled as she reached for the chopping knife, but all she could think about was the necklace Dom was accusing her of taking. She had seen it before, the diamond-studded pendant that gleamed in the light. But it wasn't hers to touch. You're lying. I know you took it. Dom spat, his eyes narrowed in disbelief. Olivia swallowed hard, trying to fight the knot in her stomach. But she knew that once an accusation like this was made, there was no going back. The weight of Dom's gaze felt suffocating. I didn't take anything, she repeated, but this time, her voice quivered with fear. Dom paced around her, his sharp gaze scanning the kitchen, looking for something, anything, that would prove his suspicions. He had always kept a tight grip on his mansion, on everything in it. But today, something had been taken from him, and he wasn't going to let it go easily. Olivia felt the familiar sting of being judged, of being seen as nothing more than a servant. A cook, a maid, someone easily discarded when the time came. But she wasn't the thief. She had never stolen anything in her life. The only thing she had ever taken was a moment to care for someone who needed it. A moment that Dom would never know about. Olivia hesitated. Then, the sound of the old woman's coughing echoed from upstairs. Dom's mother, frail and weak, had been slowly deteriorating, and no one but Olivia seemed to notice. No one but Olivia seemed to care. As Dom turned his back, ready to continue his accusations, Olivia took a deep breath and slipped quietly out of the kitchen. She had to make sure his mother was all right. She had to make sure the woman who had once been a loving mother to him wasn't left to suffer alone. She crept up the stairs and into the room, her heart aching. There, lying in bed, Dom's mother looked pale, her face a mixture of exhaustion and hunger. Olivia's hands were steady as she reached for the bowl of soup she had prepared earlier. She had seen the signs of starvation in Dom's mother long before anyone else had noticed. She wasn't the thief. She was the one who had been feeding the woman who had given birth to the man who now stood in the kitchen, accusing her. Olivia spooned the soup into the frail woman's mouth, her eyes softening. She had no idea how much longer she could keep this secret, but she would keep it as long as it took. Because sometimes, doing the right thing meant taking risks, even if it meant losing everything. But Olivia had no idea that what she had done would soon be caught on camera. And when Dom would see it, everything would change. As Olivia carefully fed Dom's frail mother, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was doing something forbidden. Every time she looked at the elderly woman's sunken eyes, her heart clenched with guilt. She was doing what no one else had the courage to do, yet it felt like she was betraying the very man who had hired her. The quiet, comforting sound of the soup spoon hitting the bowl echoed in the stillness of the room. She wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to care for the woman who had given birth to the man who owned everything. But there she was, offering solace to the one person who had been forgotten. Olivia knew the stakes were high. If Dom ever found out what she was doing, everything could be over. She could lose her job, her home, everything she had worked for. But it wasn't just a job to her. She had seen the signs of his mother's suffering long before anyone else did. And someone had to act. As she finished feeding the woman, she carefully wiped away the crumbs from the frail lips. Olivia hesitated for a moment, her hand lingering on the woman's soft skin. She wanted to stay, to make sure the elderly woman would be all right, but she knew she couldn't. She had to go before anyone noticed. Slipping out of the room, she closed the door quietly behind her. Just as she was about to walk down the hallway, she heard the faint buzz of Dom's voice from downstairs. "Olivia," he called, his tone colder than usual. She froze, her heart racing in her chest. Had he been watching her? Had he seen what she had done? She took a deep breath and quickly descended the stairs, bracing herself for the confrontation she knew was coming. When she entered the kitchen, Dom was standing by the counter, his arms crossed, his eyes narrowed in suspicion. "What were you doing up there?" he asked, his voice sharp, almost accusing. Olivia opened her mouth to explain, but the words caught in her throat. She couldn't risk telling him the truth. He would never believe her. Instead, she forced a smile and tried to sound calm. "I was just checking on your mother," she said softly, hoping her voice didn't betray her. Dom's gaze lingered on her for a moment, as if trying to gauge her sincerity. Olivia felt a bead of sweat form on her forehead, and she quickly wiped it away, hoping he hadn't noticed. But then, his eyes softened ever so slightly, and he looked away. "I don't trust anyone with her," he muttered, more to himself than to her. Olivia's stomach twisted in knots. He didn't trust her, but she didn't care about that. She wasn't doing this for his approval. She was doing it because it was the right thing. As she turned to leave the room, a faint sound caught her attention. It was the familiar sound of a phone vibrating. She glanced over her shoulder and saw Dom's phone on the counter, the screen illuminated. It was a video call from one of his men. The call went unnoticed for a few moments, and in that brief time, Olivia's curiosity got the best of her. Without thinking, she walked over to the counter and glanced at the screen. She froze. The screen showed footage from a hidden camera in the kitchen. She watched in horror as she saw herself feeding Dom's mother, the woman she had been so careful to keep hidden from him. The camera had captured every movement, every gesture. Olivia's blood ran cold. She turned to leave, but Dom's voice stopped her. "What did you see, Olivia?" His voice was calm now, but there was a hint of something darker beneath the surface. Olivia stood still for a moment, the weight of the hidden camera and her actions settling heavily on her shoulders. She had been caught, and now there was no way out. Dom's voice sliced through the air, sharp and unsettling. "What did you see, Olivia?" he repeated, his gaze now cold and calculating. Olivia felt her breath catch in her throat. The hidden camera footage. It was playing in her mind over and over. She had been caught, and she knew Dom wasn't going to let this go. I saw the video, Mr. Romano." Olivia stammered, her heart pounding as she forced the words out. She had no choice but to face him now. The truth was out. There was no going back. Dom's expression didn't change, but his eyes seemed to search her, weighing her every movement. She could feel the tension building between them, the silence heavy with unspoken questions. Olivia's mind raced, trying to find the right words, but all she could think about was the way Dom had reacted when he first saw the video. She knew he wasn't the type of man to forgive easily. "Why didn't you tell me?" Dom asked, his voice still calm, but laced with an edge of frustration. Olivia swallowed hard. "I didn't know how to explain," she admitted, her voice barely a whisper. "I didn't want to overstep. I was just trying to help your mother." She hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. She was starving, Mr. Romano. No one was taking care of her. She needed someone. Dom didn't respond immediately, his gaze fixed on her. For a moment, the weight of the silence felt unbearable. Olivia's palms were sweating as she stood before him, waiting for his judgment. Finally, Dom spoke, his words slower this time, almost as if he were processing what she had said. "You knew, didn't you?" he asked, his voice quieter, more thoughtful. "You knew she was sick. You knew no one else was looking after her." Olivia nodded slowly. "Yes," she said softly. "I've seen the signs. She wasn't getting the care she needed. I couldn't just let her suffer like that." There was a long pause. Dom's eyes softened for the briefest moment, but Olivia couldn't tell if it was compassion or something else entirely. He looked away, his expression unreadable. "You're not like the others," he said quietly, almost to himself. Olivia felt a strange mixture of relief and uncertainty. She had done what she thought was right, but the consequences were still unfolding. "But why the secrecy?" Dom asked, turning back to her. "Why didn't you come to me? I could have helped." Olivia bit her lip, unsure how to answer. "I didn't know if you'd believe me," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I didn't want to risk losing everything." Dom looked at her for a long time, his gaze intense. "You have guts, I'll give you that," he said finally, his tone still hard to read. Olivia stood frozen, waiting for his next move. Was he going to fire her? Was this the end? But Dom didn't move. Instead, he took a deep breath and set his phone down on the counter, the video still paused on the screen. "I'm not sure what to make of this, Olivia," he said, his voice almost regretful. "You've broken a lot of rules." Olivia's heart sank. She knew she had, but she hadn't been thinking about rules. She had only been thinking about the woman upstairs who had no one to care for her. "But I don't know if I can just let this go," Dom continued. "I'm still trying to figure out what it all means." Olivia swallowed, unsure of what to say. She had done everything out of a sense of duty, but now, standing here before him, she felt vulnerable. "Please, Mr. Romano," she said quietly, "don't fire me. I didn't do this for anything other than to help her. I just wanted to make sure she was okay." Dom's eyes softened again, but only for a moment. He sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "I'm not firing you, Olivia," he said finally, his voice low. "But you've crossed a line. And now I have to decide what happens next." Olivia held her breath, unsure of what to expect. Would he punish her? Or would he allow her to stay? She couldn't tell. But one thing was clear, nothing would ever be the same again. Dom leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping against the edge of the desk as he considered Olivia's words. The silence between them was thick, almost suffocating. Olivia stood in the doorway, feeling the weight of her actions pressing down on her. She had never imagined that helping Dom's mother would lead to such a confrontation. She thought about the way Dom had looked at her, the way his eyes softened for just a moment before he closed them off again. The tension was unbearable. "You've crossed a line, Olivia," Dom said finally, his voice low and deliberate. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She wasn't sure whether he was about to fire her or something worse. "I know," she replied quietly, her throat dry. "But I did what I thought was right." She needed someone. Dom's gaze flickered briefly toward the door, as if considering something beyond the conversation. "And I get that," he said after a pause. "I do. But it's not just about doing what's right. It's about trust. You broke that trust, even if it was for good reasons." Olivia felt a wave of guilt wash over her, but she knew deep down that she couldn't take back what she had done. She had been there when no one else was. She had seen the way Dom's mother suffered in silence, and she couldn't stand by and let it continue. "I'm sorry," Olivia said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I didn't mean to betray your trust. I couldn't let her go through that alone." Dom was quiet for a long moment, his eyes narrowing as he processed her words. Olivia waited, every second dragging on like an eternity. Finally, Dom spoke again, his tone shifting. "You know, Olivia," he said, leaning forward, his elbows on the desk, "I don't usually give second chances. Especially not after something like this." Olivia braced herself for what was coming. "But," Dom's voice softened slightly, his eyes meeting hers, "I understand why you did it. And I know my mother needed someone." Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Was he really going to let her stay? "So, here's the deal," Dom continued. "I'm not firing you, but you've got to earn back my trust. It won't be easy, and you'll have to prove to me that I can count on you. Not just for this, but for everything." Olivia nodded quickly, her mind racing. She had no idea what he meant by earning his trust, but she knew she would do whatever it took. "I understand," she said firmly, though her heart was still pounding in her chest. "I'll do whatever it takes." Dom stood up from his desk, walking toward her. He was so much taller than her, his presence overwhelming. "I hope you mean that, Olivia," he said, his voice more serious now. "Because I'm giving you a second chance, but if you mess up again, there won't be a third." Olivia nodded, swallowing her fear. She had been given a second chance, but she knew it wouldn't be easy. She had to prove herself now, not just to Dom, but to herself as well. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Dom looked at her for a moment, his gaze unreadable. Then he nodded once, signaling the end of their conversation. "You're welcome. But remember, this isn't over. You'll need to work hard to rebuild what you've broken." Olivia turned to leave, her mind spinning. She had no idea what was ahead, but she knew she couldn't afford to fail. The pressure was on now, and she would do whatever it took to keep her job and earn Dom's trust. As she stepped out of his office, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life had just taken a turn. She was in deeper than ever before, and there was no turning back now. Days passed, and Olivia worked harder than she ever had before. Every action, every word was carefully chosen. She knew Dom was watching, waiting for her to slip up, but she couldn't afford to fail. She had been given a second chance, but the pressure weighed on her shoulders like a heavy burden. She spent more hours in the kitchen than anyone else, making sure everything was perfect. The moment she stepped into the mansion, she became invisible again, just the way she had always been before, but now, with a greater purpose. Dom had made it clear that she had to earn his trust back, and she would. Olivia wasn't about to let this chance slip through her fingers. As the days went on, Dom watched her carefully, observing every move she made. At first, he didn't speak much to her, only giving her curt nods when he passed by. But Olivia noticed the small shifts. The way his eyes softened when he saw her working so tirelessly. The way he seemed to acknowledge her efforts in the smallest of ways. Slowly, the tension between them began to ease, though it was still present. Olivia wasn't sure what it meant, but she knew she couldn't stop now. One afternoon, as she prepared dinner for Dom and his guests, she felt a familiar presence behind her. She turned to find Dom standing in the doorway of the kitchen, watching her. His arms were crossed, and his gaze was intense, but there was something different in his eyes. Something that wasn't there before. "You're doing a good job," he said, his voice low but sincere. Olivia's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her composure. "Thank you," she replied quietly, her eyes on the task at hand. "I'm just doing my best." Dom's eyes lingered on her for a moment longer, and then he nodded. "I can see that." He turned to leave, but then paused. "You've earned more than just my trust, Olivia." Olivia's breath caught in her throat, and she looked up at him, surprised by his words. "What do you mean?" she asked softly. Dom turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "You've earned my respect." The words hung in the air between them. Olivia wasn't sure what to say. She had worked so hard for this moment, and now that it was here, it felt surreal. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Dom gave her a small smile, the first one she had seen in weeks. "You've done well, Olivia. Keep it up." And with that, he walked away, leaving Olivia standing there, her heart racing. For the first time since she had arrived at the mansion, she felt like she truly belonged. But as the days passed and Dom's approval seemed to grow, Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking in the shadows. She had earned his respect, but at what cost? And was she truly safe, or was there still more to this story that she didn't know? Olivia's routine in the mansion had shifted. She was no longer the invisible worker, blending into the background. With each passing day, Dom's respect for her grew, and so did the sense of responsibility she carried. Every task was executed with precision, every word measured. She felt the weight of her actions, of what she had done to earn this second chance, and she didn't take it lightly. Despite the calm that seemed to settle between them, there was an undercurrent of tension that Olivia couldn't ignore. Something was off. She couldn't put her finger on it, but she felt it every time Dom was in the room, every time their eyes met. There was something more to their interactions, something she couldn't yet understand. One evening, as she prepared dinner for Dom and his guests, she felt that familiar presence behind her once more. She turned, expecting to see Dom standing in the doorway, but this time, it was different. There was a chill in the air, a stillness in the room. Dom was there, but his expression wasn't one of approval. It was guarded, as if he were hiding something from her. "Olivia," he said, his voice softer than usual. She turned to face him, her heart skipping a beat. "Yes, Mr. Romano," she replied, her voice steady. Dom didn't immediately respond. Instead, he walked toward her, his eyes scanning her as if he were searching for something. Olivia's stomach twisted. "There's something I need to discuss with you," he said, his voice low. Olivia's pulse quickened. "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her tone calm, though her mind raced. Dom looked at her for a long moment, as if debating whether or not to say more. Finally, he spoke. "I know what you did," he said quietly. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced. Was he talking about the hidden camera? Did he know about the food she had been secretly giving his mother? She tried to remain composed. "I don't understand," she said, her voice trembling slightly despite her best efforts. "You helped her, didn't you?" Dom's voice was steady now, but there was an edge to it, a sharpness that sent a chill down Olivia's spine. She nodded slowly, her heart pounding. "I did what I thought was right," she said softly. She needed help. Dom looked at her, his gaze unreadable. For a moment, Olivia wondered if he was angry, if he would fire her, or worse, if he would find some other way to punish her. But instead, he sighed, the tension easing in his shoulders. "I know," he said quietly. I didn't expect you to go that far." Olivia's eyes widened. "You're not angry?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dom shook his head slowly. "No, Olivia. I'm not angry," he said, his tone softening. "But this is more complicated than you think." Olivia swallowed, trying to process his words. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice shaky. Dom took a deep breath, his eyes locking with hers. It's not just about you taking care of my mother. There are things happening in this house that you don't know about. Things I don't want you to get caught up in. Olivia felt a knot tighten in her stomach. What kind of things? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dom didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned and walked toward the door. I'll explain more later, he said, his back to her. Just be careful, Olivia. There are more dangers in this house than you realize. As Dom left the kitchen, Olivia stood there, her mind spinning. What was he trying to tell her? What did he mean by dangers? She had thought that by helping his mother, she had found a way to earn his respect, but now, it seemed like the stakes were much higher than she had ever imagined. She had no idea what she had gotten herself into. But one thing was certain, she couldn't back down now. She had to find out the truth, and she had to do it fast. The next few days felt like they passed in a blur for Olivia. Every time she entered a room, it felt like the weight of Dom's words from that evening hung in the air. There are more dangers in this house than you realize. What did that mean? What kind of dangers was Dom talking about? The mansion was grand, beautiful, and calm on the surface, but Olivia couldn't shake the feeling that something dark was lurking just beneath it all. She worked harder, trying to bury her concerns under layers of tasks. She prepared meals with the same precision as always, cleaned every corner, and made sure Dom's mother was taken care of in secret, but it was impossible to ignore the gnawing feeling that something wasn't right. One evening, as she was cleaning the kitchen after dinner, Olivia caught a glimpse of Dom through the window of the dining room. He was speaking with a group of men, their voices low and tense, too far away for her to hear clearly, but the atmosphere was thick with something she couldn't place. As Dom's gaze met hers for a moment, he motioned for her to join them. Olivia's heart skipped a beat. She hesitated before stepping into the room, trying to maintain her composure. Dom's presence was always commanding, but tonight it felt even more intense. As she entered, the men fell silent, and Dom nodded toward his seat at the table. Olivia, he said, his voice calm, but with an underlying note of something she couldn't quite decipher. Have a seat. She hesitated, but then moved to the chair he indicated. The men were looking at her now, some with curiosity, others with something more guarded in their expressions. What's going on? Olivia asked, trying to sound casual, though her heart was racing. Nothing you need to worry about, Dom said smoothly. Just a small business matter. Olivia wasn't convinced. She had been around enough to know when something was being kept from her. But she remained silent, watching as Dom and the others exchanged words in low murmurs, too quiet for her to catch. She caught glimpses of papers, notes being passed, and the occasional glance thrown her way, making her feel like an outsider. After a few minutes, Dom stood and excused the others. You can go now, he said to the men. The room felt lighter without their presence, but the tension didn't fully dissipate. As the last of them left, Dom turned to Olivia, his face unreadable. You're still not ready for this, but you need to know something. His words were sudden, catching Olivia off guard. There are people watching us. People watching you. Olivia felt a cold shiver run down her spine. She had always known Dom was a powerful man, but hearing him say it so plainly made it real. What do you mean? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I mean, you don't fully understand how deep this goes, he said, his gaze unwavering. The people who work for me, my associates, they're always watching. They're watching you, Olivia. Watching how you move, what you do. And if you want to keep your place here, you'll need to be careful. You can't make mistakes. Olivia's mind was racing, the weight of his words settling heavily in her chest. She had no idea what kind of world she had stepped into. The power, the influence, the danger. It was all so much more than she had ever imagined. What am I supposed to do? She asked, her voice shaking. Slightly. Dom's expression softened for a moment. You're not in danger, Olivia. But you're not as safe as you think, either. Olivia nodded slowly, trying to process everything he had just said. She had been trying so hard to prove herself, to earn his respect, but now it felt like the game was much bigger than she had ever expected. I'll be careful, she said finally, her voice steady despite the storm of thoughts swirling in her mind. Good, Dom replied. That's all I need to hear. As Olivia left the room, her mind was spinning. She had stepped into something far deeper than she had ever anticipated. The lines between right and wrong, loyalty and betrayal, had blurred in ways she couldn't even begin to understand. But one thing was clear. She had no choice but to keep moving forward, even if she didn't fully know what she was walking into. Olivia couldn't sleep that night. Her mind was racing with Dom's words, the weight of the truth pressing down on her like a heavy blanket. People were watching her. She couldn't help but replay the conversation in her head over and over again. You're not in danger, Olivia. But you're not as safe as you think, either. What did that mean? What was she really involved in? She had worked so hard to earn Dom's respect, but now, it felt like she was walking a fine line, a line that could easily snap under the pressure. The mansion felt different now, its grandeur no longer offering comfort, but only amplifying the isolation she felt. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, even when no one was around. Every creak of the floor, every shift of the air felt like it was part of the game Dom had warned her about. The next morning, she found herself in the kitchen earlier than usual, the weight of the day ahead already pressing down on her. She had to prove herself again, but this time, the stakes were higher. As she prepared breakfast, she couldn't help but notice the subtle tension that seemed to linger in the air. The staff was quieter than usual, their eyes darting around as if they were all part of some unspoken agreement. Olivia's mind was filled with questions. Was she just imagining things, or had something really shifted in the way people were? Looking at her, as she placed the plates on the table for Dom and his guests, she couldn't ignore the small, seemingly insignificant details that caught her attention. The way one of the waiters quickly looked away when she met his gaze. The way the head butler moved just a little too quickly to avoid being in the same room with her. It was like a silent agreement had been made, but what was it? After breakfast, as Dom left for a meeting, Olivia found herself with a few free moments. It wasn't much, but it was enough to catch her breath and think. She found herself standing in the garden, her eyes scanning the large expanse of green, the quiet beauty of it a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside her. She had to figure out what was really going on in this house. Dom had made it clear that she wasn't in danger, but there was still something off. Why had he said those words? And why was she so sure they weren't just a warning about his associates? There was more to it. As she stood there, lost in thought, she saw a figure approaching from the corner of her eye. It was one of Dom's men, someone she didn't recognize. He was tall, wearing a dark suit that blended with the shadows of the garden. Olivia's heart skipped a beat as he walked toward her, his face expressionless. "Olivia," he said in a low voice, his eyes scanning the area briefly before settling on her. "Mr. Romano wants to see you." Now, Olivia's pulse quickened. There was no warmth in his voice, no sign of anything friendly. It was just an order, a command. She nodded, trying to keep her composure. "Of course," she said softly, though her mind was racing with questions. What did Dom want now? She followed the man through the winding corridors of the mansion, the familiar sights now feeling alien. As if she were walking through a maze she couldn't escape. She felt a sense of dread settle in her stomach. What was she walking into this time? When they reached Dom's office, the man opened the door without a word and gestured for Olivia to enter. As she stepped inside, Dom was standing by the window, his back to her. The room was dimly lit, the shadows creating an almost oppressive atmosphere. He turned as she entered, his expression unreadable. "Olivia," he said, his voice calm, but there was something in his eyes that made her uneasy. "There's something I need to discuss with you." Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. "What is it, Mr. Romano?" she asked, trying to steady her voice. Dom didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked toward her, his gaze never leaving hers. The silence between them stretched on, thick with tension. "You've done well," he finally said, his voice low and controlled. "Better than I expected." Olivia felt a flicker of hope rise in her chest, but it was quickly extinguished by the weight of his next words. "But there are things happening in this house that you still don't understand. Things that could put you in a position you don't want to be in." Olivia felt a chill run down her spine. What was he talking about? What did she not know? Dom's eyes locked onto hers, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of something more, something almost vulnerable. "I need you to be careful, Olivia," he said quietly, almost like a warning. "There's more at play here than you think." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Olivia didn't know what to say, didn't know how to respond. But one thing was certain. Whatever Dom was involved in, whatever world she had been pulled into, she was in deeper than she ever realized. Olivia's mind was spinning after her conversation with Dom. There was so much she didn't know, so much that was still hidden from her. The feeling of being out of control gnawed at her, and she couldn't shake the sense that she was caught in something much bigger than herself. The mansion, once a symbol of safety and stability, now felt like a cage, its walls closing in on her with each passing day. She couldn't trust anyone, not fully. The staff? They were all part of Dom's world. His world, a world she was slowly realizing she might never understand. But she had no choice but to keep moving forward. The next day, Dom seemed different. His interactions with her were still cordial, but there was a coolness in his tone, something guarded. As he passed her in the hallway, he didn't even look at her, and she couldn't help but wonder if his warning from the day before was more than just a caution. It felt like a test she wasn't sure she was passing. That evening, after dinner, Olivia was cleaning up in the kitchen when she noticed something strange. A folder, left carelessly on the counter. It wasn't the usual paperwork. This one was thick, with official-looking documents scattered inside. She should have walked away. She should have left it untouched. But something in her, that nagging sense of curiosity, made her take a glance. Her eyes skimmed the top page. The name on the document stood out, Castellano Enterprises. It was a company name she had heard whispered between the staff, but never mentioned openly. What was it? A part of Dom's business? She glanced around the kitchen, her heartbeat quickening. No one else was in sight. Slowly, she flipped through the pages, her eyes growing wider with every line. There were contracts, financial documents, and names she didn't recognize, but that seemed important. Mafia, she thought. This was what Dom was involved in. This was the thing he had been warning her about, the thing she hadn't fully understood until now. The danger, the real danger, and she was caught in the middle of it. Just as she was about to turn the page, she heard footsteps behind her. A chill ran down her spine. She quickly shoved the folder back into place, praying she hadn't been seen. Olivia, Dom's voice rang out from the doorway. She turned slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. He was standing there, watching her with that unreadable expression. She had no idea how long he had been standing there, but she knew she had just made a mistake. I see you found something you shouldn't have, Dom said, his tone calm, almost too calm. Olivia's breath caught in her throat. I wasn't snooping, she stammered, her voice betraying her. Dom raised a hand, silencing her. It's okay, he said, his voice lowering. I know you're curious, but you need to understand something, Olivia. There are things happening here that go far beyond what you think you know. He stepped into the kitchen, his presence filling the space. Olivia felt small under his gaze. You don't belong in this world, he continued, his voice softer now. You've done well, and you've earned my respect. But there are lines you can't cross. I've tried to protect you from all of this, but you've seen too much now. Olivia swallowed hard. What was he saying? What did he mean by too much? I never meant to get involved, she said quietly. I just wanted to do the right thing. Dom's eyes softened for a moment, but the hardness quickly returned. I know, he said, almost regretfully. But the truth is, you're in this now, Olivia. And there's no way out. The finality of his words hit her like a punch to the gut. What did that mean for her? What would happen next? Dom turned and started walking away, but then he paused. Don't make the mistake of thinking you can walk away from this. You're too far in. His words lingered in the air as he left the room, and Olivia was left standing there, her mind racing. What had she gotten herself into? And what was Dom's next move?